Welcome to the Art of Pivoting Your Life, Breaking Free and Crafting Change. I'm Michelle Carbone, a clinical hypnotherapist and intuitive coach. You can call in for guidance and coaching on making a pivot in your own life. The number to call is 516-623-1240. As always, we have plenty to talk about if nobody calls in, but we'd love to hear from you too.
And as you know, I'm a relationship coach basically as well as being a hypnotherapist. And I love working with relationships. And last week we talked about some relationship tips. And I thought I would sort of continue that theme today unless somebody calls in. And obviously I can always go back to it in another show if somebody does. But communication, our relationships are based on communication. We need communication, it's everything. So this is just going to be some let's look at some communication strategies and talk about communication. And throughout our lives, we're kind of sold two dreams, but neither of them really paints a realistic picture of a truly rewarding relationship. The first dream unfolds when we're little and we're seeing movies, depictions of fairy tale relationships where everything's perfect, happy beginnings, and happily ever after. And it sells us on the magical prince and princess falling in love and then existing in this state of constant bliss. And this dream sounds ideal. So, of course, we're going to believe that. And then on the other hand, when we grow up, we're sold a completely different dream. And this one tells us that after the initial pink cloud of relationships dissipates, the rest is dysfunctional and has a lot of, yuck with some high points in between. In this dream, it is as if two people playing in a sporting event without realizing that they're on the same team. So it's like, you're playing against each other, but you're both on the same football team. And instead they're competing for who's right and who's wrong, who holds power. And it tells us that if we're lucky to have an okay ending instead of a happily ever after. And, I know for me, the young child dream was definitely where I was. And which dream is a reality for you? And does there even have to be a choice? Yes and no, right? Like you have to choose to give up the fairy tale dream, but you can create the dream you desire. And it's really true, you can. But it all starts with realizing that you're both on the same team, and the team can't succeed as long as you or your partner doesn't commit to the team concept. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in another time. But we got to get on the same wavelength here, right? And the vital factor that makes a team work is communication. Have you ever tried to implement some communication strategies in your own life? I know I have. Some of these are small steps. Some people may dismiss them because of their simplicity, but why don't we keep things simple instead of trying to complicate things all the time? So try using these techniques in your relationship, and I can guarantee that you will see improvement. So the first thing is never use the words always or never. And this is something I've definitely had to work on trying to do myself. And if anyone's ever told you, you always do this or you never do that, does it really make you want to listen? I mean, I know for me it doesn't, because it feels like this huge exaggeration of the truth, and it tends to put you on the defense, and it's not effective and won't help you build a better team. So just throw those words in the garbage. You don't need to use always or never, ever. Using when, what, and how statements. So instead of generalizing with always or never, get specific. And this can be for a positive statement or a negative one. Being specific will make the person feel like you're not judging their whole character, but rather looking at a specific behavior. So, for example, yesterday when something happened, so say when you left your clothes up on the floor, on the floor, which is what they did, it made me feel like you didn't notice or appreciate the effort I put into cleaning, which is how it made you feel. The sentence clearly tells your partner what made you feel good instead of expecting them to guess. Them knowing what makes you feel good is important. Trying to focus on the positive whenever you can. You and your partner want to make each other feel good, I'm assuming. I know that my partner and I do. And as soon as people feel negativity, that, automatic reaction is to turn on protection mode. And not just because they don't want to be viewed in a certain way, but because they don't want to view themselves in a negative way. And here's a great example. Partner, if you want your partner to help more around the house, don't focus on the times he or she doesn't help. Focus on when your partner does and make him or her feel good about it by stating your appreciation. We talked about, gratitude a lot last week. Gratitude really is just such a key. So, for example, you could say, last night when you washed the dishes, I really appreciated it because I was tired. So you're telling them when they did something, what they did, and how you felt. And your partner would be more willing to do things that please you if they felt that genuine recognition of what they did and or have done, and that it meant a lot to you. But what tends to happen in relationships is that people point out the negative more than the positive, which of course means they get more of the negative. This is something one of my girlfriends likes to talk about too. Making the sandwich, so the feel good sandwich. So whenever there's something, a negative situation you need to address with your partner, you can soften it by making sure that the negative is in the middle of a positive sandwich. So start with some positives, such as things you appreciate about them, and it's going to remind your partner that you're looking at the team and that you see the person's good qualities more than anything. And then you can, talk about the negative thing that you need to talk about. And then afterwards, specifically state the behavior that negatively affects you. And you don't want to focus too much on it, and then finish it with another positive statement. Just make sure you're also making positive statements at other times too, not just when you're trying to talk about something negative. Otherwise, as soon as you say something positive, they're like waiting for the ball to drop and they're going, oh, okay, here it comes. So, focusing on the positive, and, this is something else, but focusing on the positive is the way to create your whole environment, and what you focus on, you get. So as you focus on the positive with your partners, you are going to see more positive things. Make a commitment to improve the relationship. Make some time to create a list of ways that you and your partner can make a better team. I would even suggest you have a weekly, bi-weekly, like, hey, let's sit down and talk about our relationship, even if it's for 15, 30 minutes. Because you can each offer ideas of what you can do that will make the relationship better, rather than, pointing out what the other person should do. It's, becoming a team effort. And if you feel like there's nothing to change, you're not being realistic. We can all improve in some areas of our life. And coming to the table open-minded and realizing that your partner's telling you the things they're telling you to improve things, and being open to criticism is also important. And commit to one or two small changes that you will each make every week, and encourage small steps that your partner makes by recognizing and affirming their efforts. Again, being grateful. Throw that in there. Get some gratitude. And remember that changing ingrained patterns can take time. I mean, we have these neural pathways, these highways of thought that have had us doing things a certain way for possibly, a year, 2 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever. And it's going to take time to change our behavior. So giving encouragement when they're doing great, giving encouragement for, how can I help you make this change? What can I do to support you? Being supportive. That's going to be so important when you're trying to, create a new environment in your relationship and a new dynamic. And this is important, really, in every relationship, but don't try to be right just to prove a point. Ask yourself, is this going to matter in a month or a year? Is this problem significant enough to impact our relationship as a whole, or is it petty? Is it the problem? Is the problem more important than the team? Learn to, reflect and stop yourself from engaging in an unproductive argument that only deteriorates your relationship. And something else that a lot of us need to work on, I know I did and still make an effort to, is listen. Listen, listen, listen. A little secret of problem solving in relationships is that most problems get solved just by listening. Believe it or not, most people really just want to feel heard, whether you agree or not. When people feel heard and understood, most problems just disappear. And it can be that magical. And I can tell you from a support group that I run, you know, most of the women, one of the biggest problems that they have is that they don't feel heard. And, it's amazing how that can create like a big difference in your relationship. And how does your partner know how you're listening? So, first of all, obviously, stop talking. Pay attention to what they're saying and don't think about the things you're going to say when they're done. Listen to understand. Don't listen to respond. Listening to understand is key. And then paraphrase what your partner's saying. Repeat it back to them in your own words. Ask for clarification because sometimes someone says something and you don't really know what they mean. You assume that you do. But when you ask for clarification, you're expanding the conversation, you're deepening your understanding, and they're going to feel like, oh, they're really listening and they want to understand what I'm saying. And you can validate your partner's feelings by letting them know you understand what those feelings are, even if you don't agree with the reasons they feel that way. So you can say, for example, like, so what you're saying is that you feel X. And it's just so important to open your ears, close your mouth, stop your brain from thinking, focus on what they're saying. And if you misheard something or if you're not sure you heard it right, asking for clarification. So important. Making I statements. So don't make it about how bad their behavior is. Make it about your feelings. So instead of saying, you always ignore me when I talk because you're always on the computer, you can rephrase that as an I statement. And don't forget to drop the word always and use the 3 magic words. So we're talking about when, what, and how. So when you were using the computer last night and you didn't respond to what I was saying, I really felt that the computer is more important than I am. And remember, your partner will most likely be your greatest teacher and student in your life. The biggest challenge you will have as a student is letting go of your ego and being open to the experience that life has created to teach you. All it takes is your willingness to listen. If you want happiness and success in your relationship, and this goes for all relationships, because I mean, not all, I guess. You don't need a relationship with the cashier, that's a team, but start thinking as a team, and your potential is limitless. Um, there's a couples communication dialogue that you can use. And I would say, roughly 70% of arguments could be avoided by recognizing that problems do not necessarily need to be solved. They just need to be aired out. So this couples communication dialogue is a problem discussion, not a problem solving session. There is also a problem solving one I'll give you as well. But let's talk about the rules for this. And by the way, I do put these broadcasts, I film them on YouTube or on my Zoom, and I put them on YouTube. So if you miss any of these and you want to, find out more, get in touch with me. My email is zenmindmichelle@gmail.com or zenmindmichelle.com. So the rules for both people is, speaker has the floor, you share the floor, there's no problem solving. That's the rules for both people. For the speaker, you speak for yourself. Don't mind read. You're using the I statements. Don't go on and on. A lot of times we get lost in our story and we just like, blah, 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 just word vomit. And like, you don't need to do that. And then pause and listen for a paraphrase. So again, speak for yourself. Don't go on, and pause for the listener to paraphrase so that you can make sure they're understanding what you're saying, can give clarification, and they can show you that they're listening. And the rules for the listener are to paraphrase what you hear in your own words and don't rebut. So don't give thoughts or opinions and pay attention really easily. Um, so those are the three phases to the couple's communication dialogue. And depending on the current state of your relationship communication, you can start by practicing phase one only, or you can include phase two and phase three. So initially these dialogues can seem awkward or robotic, but remember that structuring conversation is what will help you gain trust and safety in your communication and avoid negative, destructive arguments. So if you've been having a lot of negative arguments and defenses and things like that, you want to practice getting out of that habit, and be gentle with yourselves. Um, so using these different techniques can be helpful, especially when you're discussing sensitive issues. So phase one is mirroring. So mirror what your partner makes them feel. So the speaker would state their concern, the listener would paraphrase the concern and then say, like, so what you're saying is blah, blah, blah. Is that correct? And then the speaker or the, person one can say, if the paraphrase, they can say yes if the paraphrasing is accurate, or if it's not accurate, they can elaborate. And then the listener can say, is there more? And that's because oftentimes the first concern the speaker brings up is not the real issue. Because sometimes, we like to beat around the bush. And then phase two is validation. So to validate your partner makes them feel that you think they make sense. And validating your partner's thoughts does not mean you have to agree, only that you understand how they could think that way from their perspective. And our perspectives and perceptions, they really differ between each person. So that's really important. And the speaker can ask, does this make sense to you? And the listener can say, I see where you're coming from. What you're saying makes sense. And these phases obviously are things you can do. You'll go back and forth, one person being the speaker, one person being the listener, of course. Phase three is empathy. So to empathize with your partner makes them feel understood because you truly see why they would feel the way they do. And the speaker can ask, can you see why I would feel this way? And the listener can say, I can see how you feel that way. I would probably feel that way too. Now we go on to, okay, let's say that airing it out isn't helping. So what we can do is this problem solving technique. And the first step would be to set the agenda. And you would be surprised how often couples attempt to solve problems and they aren't even sure what the problem is. So narrowing down your conversation to one specific problem is going to help a lot. Tackle each individual issue separately, because otherwise this could turn into some sort of crazy blown out thing, and that's not the goal. Step two is to brainstorm. So once you have the specific problem you'll be tackling as a team, remember you're a team, you'll have a little brainstorming session. And brainstorming is an amazing tool for coming up with solutions and ideas that you would not otherwise have discovered. And the brainstorming rules are both people must generate ideas. Either or both people could write down notes. You could say, one person could say, well, I'll be the note taker, or both people do. And write down every idea that's said. And don't discuss the idea while you're brainstorming. So you're basically just throwing the ideas out there, and don't make faces or comments about your partner's ideas. And it's encouraged to write down silly ideas. They, be creative and have fun. That could come in handy later, As step 3 would be agreement or compromise. So after brainstorming, both of you should select a few of the ideas that you feel are most promising and discuss them until you can select a solution. And remember to work as a team and that the goal is to solve your problem, not win the battle. There are no winners, there are no losers. Compromise is not a bad word. Neither of you has to sacrifice anything to come up with a functional agreement. And then step 4 is follow up. So at the time of your problem solving session, agree on a follow up time at some point in the future. And depending on when the problem you're discussing, you may need a week, you may need a month to be appropriate. Obviously, each situation is different. And the reason following up is important is because often as you begin to make changes to solve the problem you're becoming aware of, it's new information maybe, and it may uncover hidden obstacles as you work through that. And the obstacles or new information may lead you to see that the solution isn't working, and you may need to revisit this process. And if the solution isn't working, or if you aren't following through with it, having a already pre-scheduled follow-up date will make sure you're staying on top of it and not allow it to lead to a feeling of failure. And if it doesn't work the first time, just start back at step 1. So set the agenda, brainstorm, agreement, compromise, and follow up. And then, take some time to appreciate and give each other so much love and, gratitude for being open to working through things. Don't sit in a defensive posture. You want to set this up in a time when you're not feeling heated about whatever the issue is. And something that I do is I will write down what I want to say when I'm alone, so that I can gather my thoughts, highlight what I want to say, and then I don't have brain farts and forget what it is that I wanted to say. And that is just, it's really important, I think, to do that. And did you know that there are apology languages? I'm sure you know that there are love languages, but there are also apology languages. And so, sometimes when saying I'm sorry isn't enough, these are some things that, you can kind of consider real quick before the show ends. One is expressing regret, which is saying I'm sorry for blah, blah, blah. Accepting responsibility, which is I was wrong. Making restitution, what can I do to make it right? Repenting genuinely, I'll try not to do that again. And requesting forgiveness. Will you please forgive me? And we can always go more into that on another show. But for now, I'll leave you. And if you have any questions, again, you can reach me at ZenMindMichelle. That's ZenMind Michelle.com. Thanks so much, guys.